Wisdom, the final frontier to true knowledge. Welcome to Wisdom Trek, where our mission is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. Hello, my friend. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, your captain on our journey to increase wisdom and create a living legacy. Thank you for joining us today as we explore wisdom on our second millennium of podcast. This is day 1366 of our trek, and it is Worldview Wednesday. Creating a biblical worldview is essential to have a proper perspective on today's current events. To establish a biblical worldview, you must have a proper understanding of God and His Word. Our focus for these next several months on Worldview Wednesday is mastering the Bible through a series of brief insights. These insights are extracted from a book by the same title from one of today's most prominent Hebrew scholars, Dr. Micheal S. Heiser. This book is a collection of insights designed to help you to understand the Bible better. When we let the Bible be what it is, we can understand it as the original readers did and as the original writers intended. Each week we'll explore 2 additional insights. Today's topics will be Mastering the Bible, Biblical Genealogies, and John's Gospel is Different. Let's look at insight number 55. Biblical genealogies are at times artificial. Most Bible students would not regard biblical genealogies as very interesting. The assumption is that they are in the Bible to accomplish only one thing, basically, to give us generational lineages between people. But that isn't really the case. Genealogies are not always of the same type. Some genealogies are deliberately artificial, since they seek to convey some specific point of teaching. Perhaps the best example of deliberately artificial genealogy is the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. Scholars have long known that Matthew arranges his Jesus genealogy in 3 groups of 14 names. Many of the names come from the Old Testament genealogical list of the Israelite kings and patriarchs, and that is precisely how the artificial nature of the genealogy is known. If one compares the genealogy put forth in Matthew with the Old Testament genealogies, which contains the names of Jesus' genealogy, it becomes obvious that the time span covered by the 3 sections in Matthew's genealogy is too great for the generations in Matthew's list. We know how old many of the people in Matthew's genealogy were at death, so the numbers just don't add up. But the most transparent result of comparing the genealogies in Matthew is that Matthew omits names in the Old Testament list. Luke, who also provides a genealogy for Jesus, does the same thing. His names don't always match up to Matthew's. Our modern mind is quick to think that Matthew made mistakes, and that isn't the case. Matthew was telegraphing something in the 3x14 structure. Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic use letters in their alphabets for numbers. Other ancient languages do the same. Many scholars believe that the best explanation for Matthew's structuring of Jesus' genealogy is that the number 14 is the numeric equivalent to the name of David. In essence, the 3 groups of 14 said, David, 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 and then ended with Jesus, the son of David, the rightful heir to David's throne. Since Matthew spends a great deal of time on validating Jesus' claim to be the Messiah in his gospel, this playful way of pointing to David and the Messianic son of David makes sense. Not every genealogy is as interesting as this one, but they are often convey important information by their omissions and their selectivity. We need to be mindful that the ancient writers did things differently than we do. We can't impose our own sense of accuracy on these ancient texts when literary artistry, in the name of making theological statements, may be in view. Let's next move on to insight number 56. The vast majority of John's Gospel is different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The 4 Gospels are the first 4 books of the New Testament. If you ever read straight through the New Testament or read the 4 Gospels within a relatively short period of time, you'll feel like they all say the same thing. And that in large part is true of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but John is different. But since his book is about Jesus, our minds may not be alert to the fact that most everything in the Gospel of John is unique to it, and much of what's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke don't occur in John. For example, the Gospel of John doesn't have the Sermon on the Mount, parables, or exorcisms. It says nothing about the birth of Jesus, his temptation by the devil, or the Last Supper. There are also differences in vocabulary. That is, John refers to the kingdom of God only twice, whereas the other Gospels do it frequently. And chronology, that is, the cleansing of the temple occurs early in John's Gospel and late in the other three. Both ancient Greek writers and modern scholars have taken note of the uniqueness of John's content. Some patterns emerge by contrasting what John includes against the other three Gospels. The most significant observation is how John portrays Jesus. Matthew, Mark, and Luke present Jesus as the prophesied son of David, who came to earth to preach the kingdom of God. On the other hand, John presents Jesus as Logos, or the Word, the pre-existent Son of God, who boldly asserts, I am, which is a covenant name for God in the Old Testament. Instead of presenting Jesus as the teacher of the kingdom, John has Jesus teaching people about himself and his divine nature. Jesus' divine life is clear from the beginning of John's Gospel in John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. Let me read that to you. In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. His light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. The marked difference between John and the first three Gospels are a good object lesson on how important of not letting our familiarity with biblical content, in this case Jesus, impede us from the close reading of the Bible. Presuming that we know what's going on in a biblical book dulls our senses to the specific goals of the writer. Every biblical author had an agenda. We can't understand what the book or passages are communicating unless we can discern what the authors, named or not, has in focus. Having biblical content taught to us is no substitute for going back to the text, no matter how familiar it seems. And that concludes this week's lesson on another 2 insights from Dr. Heiser's book, Mastering the Bible. Next Worldview Wednesday, we will continue with 2 additional insights. I believe that you'll find each Worldview Wednesday an interesting topic to consider as we build our biblical worldview. Tomorrow we will continue with our 3-minute humor nugget that will provide you with a bit of cheer, which will help you to lighten up and live a rich and satisfying life. So encourage your friends and family to join us and to come along with us tomorrow for another day of Wisdom Trek, Creating a Legacy. If you'd like to listen to any of the past 1,365 treks or read the Wisdom Journals, they are all available at wisdom-trek.com. And I encourage you to subscribe to Wisdom Trek on your favorite podcast player so that each day's trek will be downloaded to you automatically. And thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, your mentor, but most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through the Wisdom Trek podcast and journal each day. And as we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and then leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward, enjoy your journey, and create a great day every day. See you tomorrow.